Amelia had always been the kind of person who preferred to keep her life under control. She got up early, planned her day to the minute, and loved the feeling that everything was going according to the planned scenario. But even in the most measured life, there are unexpected moments that throw you off track. That day began as usual. The house was filled with the usual noise. Her son was quietly fiddling with his toys, and she decided to do some cleaning under the sound of children's laughter. Amelia opened the closet, pulled out old boxes of things, and went into sorting through the accumulation of years. In one of the boxes, she came across an old scrapbook. The cover was faded, the pages yellowed, and the smell of dust tickled her nose. Amelia frowned. She found it odd that she had never seen it before. She opened the album, and the past flashed before her eyes. Her parents' wedding photos, her childhood pictures, familiar faces, familiar moments, but suddenly there was a picture that made her freeze between the familiar pages. It was of a woman with dark hair and a soft, barely perceptible smile. In her 30s, wearing a simple dress with a floral pattern. A stranger. Her face seemed vaguely familiar, like an echo of a long-ago dream that couldn't be fully recalled. Amelia scrutinized the photo, trying to figure out who the woman was. But the longer she looked, the more questions arose. No captions, no dates, nothing that explained who she was or why her photo was in the family album. A strange sense of unease stirred inside. Something wasn't right. This woman looked like she belonged in their history, but she had never been mentioned by anyone ever. Amelia closed the album, but her thoughts were far from calm. She got up from the floor and went to get her phone. Questions were already bugging her. "Mom, hi. Do you have a minute?" Amelia's voice sounded casual, but inside everything trembled with tension. "Sure, is something wrong?" Her mother's voice was as calm as ever. "I found an old album, a strange one. It's full of pictures of you, but there's one of a woman I don't know. Does she remind you of anyone?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. For a few seconds the silence became droning and uncomfortable. Amelia felt her mother hesitating, choosing her words. "What woman?" her mother finally asked with noticeable caution. Amelia described the picture, trying to speak as calmly as possible, but her heart was pounding like a drum. There must be some mistake. "Forget it, sweetheart. It's just an old photograph." The answer was dry, almost detached. Amelia frowned. A tremor slipped into her mother's voice that she had never heard before. This was no ordinary absent-mindedness, but something more, fear or mystery. "Mom, are you sure? It's not someone from our family? Why have I never seen her before?" "Amelia, leave it alone." Her mother's voice suddenly became stern. "Believe me, it's nothing important. It's just an old memory." After saying that, her mother said goodbye, leaving Amelia alone with her thoughts. She slowly placed the phone on the table, trying to make sense of the strange conversation. The words, "leave it alone," echoed in her head. Normally, her mother was always eager to share stories from the past. What was so special about this picture? The anxiety wouldn't let go. Amelia opened the box again, hoping to find some clue. At the bottom was a yellowed envelope, and signed and undated. She opened it cautiously, as if afraid to disturb something forgotten. Inside was a piece of paper written in smooth handwriting. "Darling, I miss you. This was the hardest decision of my life, but I know it's what's best for everyone. Forgive me." Amelia reread the letter several times, as if trying to find hidden meanings between the lines. Who had written this letter? Who was it addressed to? And why was it hidden so far out of sight? Questions swarmed in her mind, giving her no respite. She felt that she was on the threshold of something big, important, and frightening. This letter was like a bridge between past and present. But where would it lead? Amelia looked up at the stranger's picture and whispered, "Who are you?" There were no answers yet, but one thing she knew for sure. There was no turning back. Amelia couldn't calm down. She felt like a detective hero who accidentally found the key to an unknown mystery and now just can't stop. The apology sheet and the picture of the stranger seemed to stick to her mind. Questions tore her head apart. Who was she? Why the letter? And why was her mother so obviously avoiding the conversation? The next day, Amelia, tired and still lost in thought, decided to make a move. She wasn't going to give up and let the situation go. Her mother's behavior seemed too strange to her. Memories surfaced in her mind that her mom always kept her cool and didn't let her emotions get the best of her. But yesterday, there was real fear in her voice. Amelia knew that talking directly to her mom wouldn't help, so she decided to start her own investigation. First, she went through all the remaining old documents and things in the box. The letter was the only clue left, but it was too short and cryptic. Then she turned to the internet, trying to find some information on the stamp. But, of course, she found nothing useful. So she did what no one would have expected her to do. She went to her Aunt Linda, her mother's younger sister. Linda had always been more open than her older sister, and Amelia knew that if anyone could shed light on the story, it was her. Aunt Linda greeted Amelia with joy, as she always did. Her house smelled of fresh buns and vanilla cookies, and for a second Amelia even wanted to forget the reason for her visit. But an inner unease reminded her of itself. "There's something you want to ask, isn't there?" Linda immediately noticed the serious expression on her niece's face. Amelia nodded and sat down across from her at the kitchen table. "Linda, I need to know something about Mom," she began cautiously. "I found a picture in an old album of a woman. Young, with brown eyes, hair short. Mom avoids talking about it. Do you know anything about it?" Linda sighed and looked away for a moment. "Amelia, sometimes there are things in the past that are better left where they were," she said quietly. Amelia felt that her aunt knew more than she was saying. "Linda, please. I have a feeling something is wrong. I need to understand who this woman is and why Mom is so afraid to talk about it."
"It's important to me."
Auntie was silent for a long time, as if weighing each word. Finally, she spoke slowly.
"Okay.
"If you've already found all this, I guess it's time." Amelia held her breath. "That woman, her name is Anna. And yes, she's related to your family." "She's dash," Linda paused and looked directly into Amelia's eyes.
"She's your aunt."
Amelia's breath caught.
"Aunt?"
she asked, not believing her ears. "But how?" "It's a long story," Linda said and sighed. "When your mother was young, she fell in love with a man the family didn't approve of. Her parents were adamantly opposed to their relationship and forced her to move to another city for a few months. There she gave birth to a child, a girl. But her parents insisted she give her up." Amelia listened without looking away, feeling each new fact punching a hole in her idea of family. "Mom gave up her sister?" Her voice shook with shock. Linda nodded. "She was forced to. She didn't want it, Amelia. It broke her. She tried to start over afterward, but the pain stayed with her forever." Amelia sat in silence, trying to digest what she had heard. Everything fell into place now. The picture in the album, the letter of apology. It was written by her mother, addressed to Anna, the very girl she had left behind. "Had you known about this all along?" Amelia asked. Linda lowered her eyes. "I knew, but it's not my story. I promised my mom I wouldn't tell anyone." Amelia felt both hurt and angry at the same time. Why had her mother kept it from her? Why had everything been kept secret for so many years? "Is she alive?" she asked suddenly. Her aunt nodded. "The last time I heard from her was a few years ago. She went to do volunteer work abroad." Amelia closed her eyes, trying to cope with her emotions. Her mother, that same strong, always confident woman, had lived her whole life with this secret. "Thank you, Linda," she said finally. She knew she was going to have a serious conversation with her mother next. That evening, back at home, Emily sat in silence for a long time. The photo of the stranger lay on the table in front of her. She knew now who this woman was: her aunt. A person she had never known, but who was forever inscribed in their family history. Amelia dialed her mother's number. She realized that the conversation would be difficult, but it was impossible to remain silent any longer. "Mom?" Amelia's voice sounded soft but confident. "Are you talking about this again?" her mother asked tiredly. "I was at Linda's," Amelia said quietly. A heavy breath was heard on the other end of the line. "So you know everything," her mother replied after a long pause. Amelia nodded, though her mother couldn't see her. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I was afraid." Afraid you wouldn't be able to understand me or forgive me. Her mother's voice shook with emotion. Amelia felt bitterness and pity spilling into her chest at the same time. I want to know everything, Mom. I need to know the truth all the way through, she said firmly. There was silence again on the other end of the line, but Amelia knew that now she would be told everything. The conversation with her mother had started out hard, as if both of them were afraid to take an extra step, lest they tear apart the remains of the fragile world they'd spent so long building. Amelia sat on the couch, clutching her phone. While Aunt Linda's words echoed in her head, she didn't want this. It broke her, and now she was looking at the very woman who had carried that pain inside for years and hid it behind strong walls of habitual austerity. Mom, please tell me everything. Emily's voice was shaking, but there was determination in it. A heavy sigh sounded on the other end of the line. Okay, if you've already found out everything, I think it's time to tell you the truth, her mother finally replied. Just know it hurts to remember. Amelia closed her eyes, preparing herself for the story she knew would change her forever. I was 19, her mother began. I was in love. So much so that I didn't notice anything around me. His name was Tomasz. Her voice trembled, as if she had traveled back to that time and seen his face again. He was my first in everything. Amelia was silent, only listening, immersed in every sound, every word. My parents didn't approve of him. He was from a simple family, no prospects, no proper upbringing, as they said then. They thought I deserved better. My mother paused briefly to catch her breath. When I found out I was pregnant, my world turned upside down. I was happy, and then everything went downhill. Amelia felt her heart clench. She knew this story would not have a happy ending. My parents were furious. They forbade me to see Tomasz, locked me up at home, and then sent me to another town, supposedly to relatives. In fact, they sent me there so no one would know anything. To hide the shame. Her mother spoke with such bitterness that Amelia involuntarily imagined what it was like to be left alone, without support, with a life growing inside and a broken heart. I gave birth to Anna. Her mother's voice became quiet. She was so beautiful, tiny hands, eyes like Tomasz's. I remember her smell, her first cry. Amelia clutched the phone tightly, because she felt that otherwise she would cry. They only let me hold her once, her mother whispered. And then they took her away. They said it was for the best. That I was young, that I'd have another family, that it was just a mistake that needed to be fixed. Amelia covered her face with her hand, her own tears running down her cheeks. I couldn't do anything, her mother continued. I was broken. Tomasz, he didn't know anything. He was forced to leave, too. And you never saw her again? Amelia asked quietly.
No.
But I wrote to her. I tried to find her, to find out something.
But it was impossible then.
The letters went unanswered. I didn't know where they went or if they went at all. Amelia looked at Anna's picture and her heart broke. She suddenly realized her mother's whole life was imbued with this silent grief. Every stern remark she'd made, every overzealous attempt at control, everything was an attempt to compensate for that loss. Why didn't you tell me before? Amelia asked, trying not to be accusatory, but bitterness still slipped into her voice. I didn't want you to look at me with pity or judgment, her mother answered honestly. I didn't want that past to define your life the way it had defined mine. Amelia was silent for a long time, digesting what she had heard. She's alive, Mom. I know she's alive, she said finally. Linda told me that Anna had volunteered overseas. There was silence on the other end of the line. It was as if the mother was digesting what she'd heard. Do you want to find her? She asked cautiously. Yes, Amelia answered firmly. This is my family, and I want to recognize her. Her mother's voice trembled. I understand, but Amelia, be careful. Sometimes the truth brings more pain than relief. I know, Mom, but I'm ready. The conversation ended, but for Amelia, it was only the beginning. She could no longer sit still and wait. She needed to take action. Amelia began her own investigation. She contacted several volunteer organizations, found forums where people were searching for missing relatives. She didn't know how long it would take, but each step brought her closer to the truth. A few weeks later, she received an email. It contained only a few lines. "Hello. My name is Anna. I received your message. Are you really my niece?" Amelia couldn't believe her eyes. Her heart sank and her fingers trembled as she reread those words over and over again. It was her.
Anna.
The woman from the photograph, the mysterious stranger, now a real person with a real voice. Amelia immediately typed out a reply.
Yes.
"I'm your sister's daughter, and I would like to meet you." The answer came faster than she expected. "I wanted to. Tell me everything you know." Tears came to Amelia's eyes again. She realized that their long journey was just beginning. After the correspondence with Anna began, the days stretched unbearably long for Amelia. Each new message seemed like a step toward something big, but along with it came fear and doubt. What would she tell Anna? How would she explain that her mother couldn't fight for her? Would Anna understand, or would she forever remain a cold shadow on the other end of the screen? Anna proved to be open and friendly. Her letters were warm, but full of a slight sadness. She told about herself with restraint. She grew up in a foster family, good but strict. She knew nothing about her birth parents, only that her mother had abandoned her immediately after her birth. After school, Anna searched for herself for a long time and finally devoted her life to helping others. She worked in an international volunteer organization, traveled to hotspots, and helped those who had lost their homes or families. Every letter she wrote was imbued with humanity and strength. Amelia was amazed at what a strong and bright person her aunt had become, despite her difficult past. The moment came when they decided to meet in person. Anna said that she would be in Warsaw in a week and that she wanted to see Amelia. Amelia felt that this would be one of the most important meetings of her life. She thought for a long time whether she should tell her mother about it and finally made up her mind. That evening, when the baby was asleep, Amelia dialed her mother's number again. "Mom, I need to talk to you," she began softly. "What's wrong?" There was tension in her mother's voice, as if she knew what she was going to talk about. "I met with Anna. I've only corresponded with her so far, but we agreed to see each other in person. She'll be in Warsaw in a week." Amelia exhaled as if a mountain had fallen from her shoulders. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Are you really going to meet her?" Her mother's voice was full of emotion. "Yes, Mom. And I think you should come with me." "Amelia, I'm not sure I can. It's too hard for me. I don't know how she'll react. What if she hates me?" My mom's voice was shaking. "Mom, I think you should give her a chance. And yourself too." Amelia spoke calmly, but her heart was pounding like crazy. "You said you've dreamed of seeing her. Maybe it's time you did." "I'll think about it," her mother said at last. The week passed in worry and anxiety. Amelia prepared for the meeting, thinking about what to say. She went over the options a million times, but each time she realized that no plan would not save them from the heat of emotion that awaited them. On the day of the meeting, she and her mother arrived in Warsaw early in the morning. Her mother decided to go with her, even though she hesitated until the last moment. Their appointment was in a cozy cafe in one of the quiet streets of the city. Amelia had chosen this place on purpose. Quiet, without fuss. When they entered, Amelia's heart was racing so fast she could hardly breathe. Her mother walked beside her, pale and tense-faced. A woman was already seated at one of the tables. It was easy to recognize her, the same soft smile, the same brown eyes. She looked up and froze for a moment, as if she couldn't believe this was really happening. Amelia was the first to step forward. "Anna?" The woman smiled and stood up to meet her. "Amelia?" They embraced, and in that moment Amelia felt tears come to her eyes. It was a warm, sincere encounter that words could not describe. Anna turned her attention to the woman next to Amelia and froze. Her gaze became serious. Amelia's mother stepped forward, nervously rubbing the strap of her bag. "Hello, Anna." Her voice was quiet, but full of bitterness. Anna stared at her for a long moment without saying a word. This silence lasted only a few seconds, but for everyone it seemed like an eternity. Finally, Anna sighed and said, You're my mom. Amelia's mother nodded, and her eyes filled with tears. She tried to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. I've waited my whole life for this moment, Anna said, and dreaded it at the same time. Her mother stepped closer to her. Forgive me if you can. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I prayed to God that someday you would know the truth. Anna looked her straight in the eyes and suddenly, to Amelia's utter surprise, hugged her. I don't want to live with hate, Anna said quietly. I just want to understand. These words seemed to break down the wall that had stood between them for years. Amelia's mother burst into tears, finally allowing herself to let out the pain she'd been carrying around for so many years. Amelia couldn't help herself either and joined in the embrace. They spent several hours in the cafe, talking about the past and present. Anna talked about her life, about her adoptive parents, about how she tried to find answers to questions about her origins. Amelia's mother talked about the loss she had experienced, about how she was afraid Anna would hate her. That day they became a family anew. Even though many years had passed, even though there had been mistakes and pain in the past, but now they had a future. When Amelia returned home, she felt devastated but happy. She looked at the old album that still lay on the table. That photo, once the beginning of a great journey, was now no longer a mystery. Sometimes one photo can turn a whole life upside down. But if you're brave enough to find the answers, it can give you not only pain, but also new hope. Several weeks passed after the meeting in Warsaw. Emily couldn't forget those moments, the trepidation, the tension, the tears, and the long-awaited reconciliation. She often replayed that day in her head and caught herself thinking that everything could have gone differently. But it was as if fate had given them a chance to heal old wounds. Anna stayed in town for a few more days to spend time with her family. Amelia had organized a dinner at her home, inviting her and her mother. Everything was supposed to be calm and cozy, but there was still tension in the air. Amelia realized that it was impossible to erase years of pain and reticence in one day. When everyone was gathered around the table, conversation began with a careful exchange of memories. Amelia's mother talked about how she and Anna might have spent time together if fate had turned out differently. Anna listened, nodding, but there was something in her eyes that spoke more than words. At one point, Anna looked up and said, I realize that a lot of things can't be taken back. But I still want to know, why? Why didn't you fight for me? The silence at the table became almost palpable. Amelia's mother put down her fork and stared at her hands for a long time, as if trying to find an answer to a question that had plagued her all her life. I was young and scared, she began quietly. When they took you away, I felt like I'd lost a part of myself forever. But my parents, they convinced me it was for the best. They said I could start over. That you'd find a family that would give you everything I couldn't give you then. Anna was silent, but her gaze softened. It was as if she were trying to understand her mother's circumstances. You're right, Amelia's mother continued. I could have fought. But I was too broken. I let others decide for me. Amelia squeezed her mother's hand, feeling it tremble. Her heart was torn with pity and anger at the same time. I don't hold a grudge, Anna finally said. But that doesn't mean I wasn't hurt. I know, her mother whispered. Silence came over them again, but it was a different kind of silence, not hostile, but filled with understanding. To lighten the mood, Amelia smiled and said, Anna, you haven't tasted my specialty dessert yet. It's the best thing I can offer to make up for all the tears. Anna laughed, and the tension subsided. They moved on to lighter topics. Amelia's childhood, her son, Anna's volunteer trips. The house filled with quiet laughter that gradually melted the ice between them. The next day, Anna suggested that Emily take a walk around the city. They walked through the narrow streets, enjoying the fresh air and the rare rays of sunshine. Anna looked pensive the whole time, as if she were holding something in. Finally, she stopped and looked at Amelia. You know, I always dreamed of having a sister or brother. I grew up alone, and I always felt like an outsider, even among my loved ones. Amelia looked at her with sadness and warmth.
You're not alone now, she said.
We are a family. Anna nodded and smiled. Thank you for that. They continued their walk, chatting about little things and making plans for the future. Anna revealed that she was going to go back to volunteer work, but now she knew she had family who would be waiting for her. A few days later, Anna flew away. The goodbye was warm, but full of hidden sadness. Amelia hugged her at the airport, promising that they would definitely meet again. "And don't forget to write," she said, smiling through her tears. "I promise," Anna replied and hugged her tightly. As Anna disappeared behind the glass doors of the terminal, Amelia felt both empty and calm at the same time. Her heart was filled with hope. Several months passed. Amelia's life gradually returned to normal. Morning chores, work, walks with her son. But every time she looked at that very photograph, now framed and placed on the shelf, she remembered that one random moment could change everything. Amelia's mother had changed, too. She was no longer so withdrawn and strict. Each of their mornings began with a warm phone call. Each "How are you doing?" sounded with genuine concern. The past was no longer a heavy burden because it was now replaced by something else: understanding and forgiveness. Then one day, while going through the mail, Amelia saw the letter from Anna again. "Hi, Amelia. I have a surprise for you. I'm back in Europe and planning a trip to your city. Keep the date open. I can't wait to see you again. We're family, aren't we?" Amelia smiled. "True," she wrote back. Amelia reread Anna's letter several times, smiling like a child who had received an unexpected gift. The news that Anna was going to visit again filled her heart with joy and excitement. In her head at once plans began to whirl: where they would go for a walk, what to cook for dinner, what places to show. But along with the joy came a slight anxiety. Amelia realized that for her mother it would again be a difficult ordeal. A couple days later, she decided to visit her mother to discuss Anna's upcoming visit. Her mother's house, usually filled with the familiar silence and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, greeted her with the sound of an old radio. Her mother was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea, looking thoughtfully out the window. "Mom, I have good news," Amelia began, smiling. Her mother looked up, and a faint but warm smile flashed across her face. "Anna is coming again," Amelia said, taking a seat across from her. The mother stood still for a moment, as if digesting what she had heard. "Again?" Her voice was quiet, but it was not as anxious as before. "For how long?" "She said she was only coming for a few days, but she wants to see us again," Amelia answered. Her mother nodded and sipped her tea. "That's good. I'm glad we have a chance to be a family now. You know, all my life I thought I had missed this chance forever. And now..." She hesitated and looked at her daughter, her eyes filled with warmth and bitterness at the same time. "Now I have to learn to accept it as a gift, not a punishment." Amelia squeezed her hand and smiled. "You've already accepted it. The rest is just details," she said encouragingly. A week later, Amelia stood at the train station and waited impatiently for Anna. A crowd of passengers filled the platform, and lo and behold, among the many faces, she spotted a familiar figure. Anna smiled and waved. "Amelia!" she exclaimed, running up and hugging her tightly, as if she were afraid to let go. "You have no idea how much I've missed you," Amelia replied, barely holding back her tears. Anna looked a little tired, but happy. They quickly picked up their luggage and headed home. "Mommy's waiting for you," Amelia said as they rode in the car. Anna nodded, her gaze becoming serious. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," she admitted. "I realized that all this time I hadn't been afraid of finding out the truth, but of not being able to accept it." Amelia glanced at her briefly and smiled. "You've already proved that you can." When they entered the house, her mother stood in the doorway, nervously rubbing the edge of the kitchen towel. Her gaze was full of mixed feelings: joy, excitement, and cautious hope. "Hello, Anna," she said softly. "Hello, Mom," Anna replied after a short pause, as if testing how the words sounded. Instead of long speeches, they hugged again, as they had done that first time. And again tears flowed, but this time they were tears of relief. "Welcome home," her mother whispered, not letting go of Anna. That evening they gathered around the table again, but this time the atmosphere was much lighter and warmer. Anna talked about her trips, shared stories from her life as a volunteer. She could talk in such a way that it seemed as if life itself spoke in her voice, brightly, sincerely, with a smile and pain at the same time. Her mother listened to her as if trying to catch up on the years she had missed. And although the pain was still somewhere inside, its place was increasingly taken by the joy that fate had given them a second chance. The next day, Anna suggested that the three of them spend some time together, a small picnic in the countryside. Emilia enthusiastically supported the idea, and her mother was reticent, but agreed. They left early in the morning, taking with them a plaid blanket, a basket of homemade pastries, and hot tea. The forest air was cool but fresh, and the light breeze ruffled the leaves on the trees, creating a sense of calm and comfort. "It's been a long time since I've been out like this," her mother sighed, sitting down on the blanket. Anna looked at her and smiled. "Then this is an excuse to make such outings more often." They sat under the shade of the trees, drinking tea and laughing at funny memories from Emily's childhood. The mother recalled funny moments when her daughter was just learning to walk, and Anna listened with genuine interest, as if collecting pieces of a life she had never had. "You know, Mom," Anna said suddenly, her voice softer, "I always thought that not everyone could be a mother. And now I realize that motherhood isn't just about being there from the beginning. It's about finding a way to stay close, even when fate has ruined everything." Her mother looked at her with gratitude, and tears glistened in her eyes again. "Thank you for giving me this chance," she whispered. Anna silently squeezed her hand, and the gesture said more than any words could. They spent the evening that day at home watching old movies and photos. Emilia showed Anna her childhood albums and told her stories, which she listened to with rapt attention. For the first time in a long time, their family felt complete. When night fell and everyone went to their rooms, Emily sat in silence for a long time, looking at the stars outside the window. She felt grateful to fate, to her mother, and even to the hardships that, oddly enough, had made their family stronger. The next day, Anna was leaving again, but this time the goodbye was not so painful. "We'll see each other more often now," she said with confidence. "I promise." "We'll be waiting for you," Emilia replied, hugging her tightly. As Anna left for her train, her mother walked over to Emilia and put her hand on her shoulder. "You've done what I've been afraid to do all my life," she said quietly. "We did it together, Mom." Emilia smiled. And for the first time in a long time there was no shadow of pain or regret in the house, only the light of hope and a new beginning. Thank you for listening to the end of this story. It wasn't easy, but I hope you found something in it for you. Maybe a reminder of the importance of forgiveness, the strength of family, or just a reason to reflect on your loved ones. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Your stories and opinions make our channel alive and truly special. Subscribe so you don't miss new life stories that will touch your heart and remind you that every moment of our lives matters. I also want to apologize for any mistakes. The language is not my native tongue, but I try to learn and improve. The voiceover is done with artificial intelligence, and it is important to me that it gets better and better. Thank you for your support and understanding. See you soon.